The funeral had been perfectly orchestrated, just like everything else in the Thompson family. Black suits, expensive flowers, and fake tears from people who hadn't spoken to Dad in years but showed up hoping for a piece of his fortune. I stood in the back corner of the chapel, watching my half-brothers David and Michael work the crowd like politicians at a campaign rally. "Thank you all for coming," David announced from the podium, his voice dripping with false sincerity. Our father would have been so moved to see how many lives he touched. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dad had barely spoken to most of these people. He'd spent the last 10 years of his life isolated in his mansion, bitter and alone, driven away from everyone by his own greed and paranoia. Everyone except me. I was the bastard son, the product of Dad's affair with his secretary 28 years ago. While David and Michael grew up in the main house with their mother Patricia, I was raced across town by my mom, visiting Dad on alternate weekends like some kind of consolation prize. "Now," David continued, pulling out a folded document, "I know everyone is wondering about Dad's final wishes. Michael and I want to be transparent about this." Michael stepped forward, his expensive suit fitting him perfectly. At 35 he was 3 years older than me and had never let me forget it. Dad left very clear instructions. As his legitimate sons, we've inherited the business empire he built. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thompson Industries was worth approximately $180 million. A logistics and shipping company that Dad had built from nothing over 4 decades. Everyone in the room knew what that inheritance meant. "Of course," David added with a patronizing smile in my direction, "Dad made provisions for Marcus as well. A trust fund that will provide for his modest needs." I said nothing. I'd learned long ago that speaking up in Thompson family gatherings only led to public humiliation. Better to stay quiet and let them reveal themselves. Patricia, their mother, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Richard was always so thoughtful about family," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Even the extended family." The extended family comment landed exactly as she'd intended. I was the reminder of Dad's infidelity, the living proof that her perfect marriage had been a lie. She'd never forgiven me for existing. "The will is very clear," Michael said, waving the document. "Thompson Industries, the estate, the investment portfolio, everything goes to David and myself as it should." More nods from the crowd. Made sense to them. Why would a bastard son inherit anything significant? I was lucky to get anything at all. Father Martinez, the family priest, stepped forward to begin the final blessing. "Let us pray for Richard Thompson's soul and for the family he leaves behind." As heads bowed, I found myself thinking about the real Dad. Not the public figure these people thought they knew, but the complicated, lonely man I'd spent time with over the past few years. While David and Michael had been busy with their own lives, barely visiting, I'd been the one checking on Dad regularly. I'd been the one who drove him to doctor appointments when his health started failing. I'd been the one who sat with him during chemo treatments, listening to his stories about building the company from nothing. Most importantly, I'd been the one he'd talked to about his disappointments. "Those boys never worked a day in their lives," he told me 6 months ago, his voice weak from treatment. "Everything handed to them on a silver platter. They think the business runs itself." "Maybe they'll learn," I'd said. Dad had laughed bitterly. "At 50 million each. They'll run it into the ground within 5 years. All my work wasted." It was during one of those conversations that Dad had made a decision that would change everything. Now, as Father Martinez finished his prayer, I watched my half-brothers soak up the condolences and congratulations. They were already planning their new lives as multimillionaires, already counting money they thought was theirs. "Thank you all for being here," David said as the service concluded. "There will be a reception at the house, and then tomorrow we'll begin the process of transferring Dad's assets." People began filing out, stopping to shake hands with David and Michael, offering their sympathies and their congratulations on their inheritance. A few people nodded at me politely, but most ignored me entirely. I was about to leave when the chapel doors opened and an elderly man in an expensive suit walked in. He looked around the room with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, clearly searching for someone. "Excuse me," he called out in a clear, authoritative voice. "I'm looking for the Thompson family. I'm Robert Harrison from Harrison, Wells and Associates." David stepped forward immediately. "I'm David Thompson. This is my brother Michael. We've been expecting you." Actually, the man said, consulting a leather portfolio, I'm looking for Marcus Thompson specifically. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me as I raised my hand uncertainly. I'm Marcus. Mr. Harrison walked over to me with purpose. Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a remarkable man. Thank you, I said quietly. I need to speak with you about your father's estate. Is there somewhere private we can talk? David interrupted loudly. Excuse me, Mr. Harrison, but there must be some mistake. The estate matters have already been settled. My brother and I are the primary beneficiaries. Mr. Harrison turned to David with a confused expression. I'm sorry, who are you exactly? David Thompson. Richard Thompson's son. And you are? Michael Thompson. Also Richard's son. Mr. Harrison nodded slowly. I see. And who prepared the estate documents you're referring to? Michael pulled out the will they'd been waving around. Our family attorney, James Mitchell, handled everything. Interesting, Mr. Harrison said, examining the document. Because James Mitchell hasn't been your father's attorney for over 2 years. Your father fired him and hired my firm to handle all his legal affairs. The color began draining from David's face. That's impossible. We spoke with Mitchell just last week. About what? About Dad's will, obviously. He explained everything to us. Mr. Harrison's expression grew stern. Mr. Mitchell had no authority to discuss your father's estate. In fact, the document you're holding is legally meaningless. Patricia stepped forward, her voice shaking. What are you saying? I'm saying that this, he held up the fake will, is not Richard Thompson's last will and testament. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. David grabbed the document back from Mr. Harrison. This is ridiculous. That man has been our family lawyer for 20 years. Had been, Mr. Harrison corrected. Your father terminated his services after discovering some irregularities in how Mitchell was handling certain matters. Michael was now visibly sweating. What kind of irregularities? The kind that led to Mr. Mitchell losing his law license last month. The crowd was now watching this drama unfold like spectators at a tennis match. I could see neighbors, business associates, and family friends all hanging on every word. Now then, Mr. Harrison continued, turning back to me. Marcus, your father's actual estate planning is quite extensive. We need to discuss the transfer of Thompson Industries, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios, and several other assets. Transfer to who? David demanded. Mr. Harrison looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. To Marcus, of course. He's the sole beneficiary. If the room had been quiet before, it was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. That's impossible, Patricia whispered. I assure you it's not. Your father made his wishes very clear. Marcus Thompson inherits the entire estate, valued at approximately $180 million. David's face had gone from pale to red. There has to be a mistake. Dad wouldn't leave everything to him. He's not even. Not even what? Mr. Harrison asked sharply. Not even legitimate, Michael finished. The lawyer's expression turned ice cold. Mr. Thompson acknowledged Marcus as his son and legal heir over 20 years ago. His inheritance rights are unquestionable. I was still processing what I was hearing. Dad had left me everything? The entire company, the house, all of it. Furthermore, Mr. Harrison continued, your father specifically instructed me to explain his reasoning if anyone contested the will. He pulled out a sealed envelope from his portfolio. This is a letter your father wrote, to be read in exactly this situation. You don't have to. I started to say. Actually, I do. Your father was very specific about this. He opened the envelope and began reading in a clear voice that carried throughout the chapel. To my sons David and Michael, by the time you hear this, you've probably already celebrated your inheritance. You've probably already spent the money in your minds, already planned your lives as wealthy men who never had to work for anything. The truth is, I've been watching all of you for years. I've seen who visits me when I'm sick, who calls just to check on me, who actually cares about me as a person rather than as a bank account. Marcus has been a son to me in every way that matters. He's worked summers at the company since he was 16, learning the business from the ground up. He's driven me to medical appointments, sat with me during treatments, and been there when I needed family. David and Michael, you've visited me exactly 4 times in the past 2 years, And 3 of those visits were to ask for money. Marcus has never asked me for anything. He's built his own life, earned his own money, and treated me with respect not because of what I could give him, but because I'm his father. Therefore, I leave my entire estate to Marcus Thompson, confident that he will honor the family name and use these resources wisely. To David and Michael, you each have trust funds worth $500,000 that I established years ago. That money, combined with your educations and your opportunities, should be enough to build your own lives. I suggest you learn to work for what you want just like I did. Mr. Harrison folded the letter and looked around the room. The will is ironclad, witnessed by 3 independent parties and filed with the probate court. There are no grounds for contest. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, David found his voice. This is insane. Dad was obviously not in his right mind. He was sick, he was on medication. Your father was evaluated by 2 independent psychiatrists before signing this will, Mr. Harrison interrupted. He was found to be completely competent and clear-minded. Michael turned to me with fury in his eyes. You manipulated him. You took advantage of a sick old man. Actually, Mr. Harrison said before I could respond, your father specifically anticipated that accusation. The will includes detailed documentation of Marcus's character and actions over the past several years, compared to yours. He pulled out another document. Your father kept meticulous records. Marcus visited him 127 times in the past 2 years. David, you visited 4 times. Michael, you visited twice. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment. Marcus drove your father to 23 medical appointments. Neither of you offered to help with even one. Patricia was now crying, but not from grief. From rage. When your father was hospitalized last Christmas, Mr. Harrison continued, Marcus spent 3 days sleeping in the hospital chair. You 2 didn't even know he was there until Marcus called you. We had our own lives. David protested. Indeed you did. Lives funded by trust funds your father established, jobs at companies where your father was a major investor, houses purchased with down payments your father provided. And yet when he needed you, you were nowhere to be found. The crowd was now openly staring at David and Michael with a mixture of shock and disgust. These weren't grieving sons. They were opportunists who'd been caught. There's one more thing, Mr. Harrison said, turning back to me. Your father wanted you to know about the company. Thompson Industries has been struggling for the past 3 years, largely due to poor decisions made by the current management team. He gestured toward David and Michael. Your father had been planning to restructure the entire operation. He felt that new leadership was necessary to save the company and its 847 employees. What does that mean? I asked. It means you now own a company that employs nearly 1,000 people, and your decisions will determine whether they keep their jobs. The weight of that responsibility hit me immediately. This wasn't just about inheriting money. It was about inheriting the livelihoods of hundreds of families. Your father believed you were the only one who could turn the company around. He's been watching how you handle pressure, how you treat people, how you make decisions. This inheritance isn't just a gift, it's a test. David was now shaking with rage. This is theft. Plain and simple theft. No, I said quietly, speaking up for the first time. This is consequences. Everyone turned to look at me. For 10 years you 2 treated Dad like an ATM machine. You showed up when you needed money, ignored him when you didn't. You never worked at the company, never learned the business, never cared about anything except what you could get from him. My voice grew stronger. I didn't visit Dad to get an inheritance. I visited him because he was my father and he was alone and he was scared. Patricia stepped forward. You have no right to judge us. You're right, I said. I don't. But Dad did. And this is his judgment. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. The estate transfer will begin immediately. Marcus, we need to schedule several meetings to review all the assets and business operations. Of course. There is one final item, he said, pulling out a small envelope. Your father wanted you to have this privately. I took the envelope, recognizing Dad's handwriting on the outside. For Marcus, to be opened when you're ready to understand. What about us? Michael demanded. What are we supposed to do? Mr. Harrison consulted his notes. You each have access to trust funds worth $500,000. Your father suggested you use that money to learn how to build something yourselves. 500,000? David's voice cracked. That's nothing. The company alone is worth over 100 million. Then perhaps you should have valued your father as more than just a source of income, I said. As people began filing out of the chapel, many stopped to congratulate me, though most seemed shocked by the turn of events. The neighbors who'd ignored me earlier were now very interested in shaking my hand. Patricia approached me last, her face a mask of controlled fury. This isn't over, she said quietly. We'll fight this. With what lawyers? I asked. The ones you can afford on your husband's life insurance? She turned and walked away, followed by David and Michael, who were already arguing about their next move. Mr. Harrison and I were the last ones left in the chapel. Your father was very proud of you, he said quietly. He talked about you often during our meetings. I still can't believe he did this. He said you'd say that. He also said to tell you that this wasn't charity, it was an investment in the future he wanted to see. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. What am I supposed to do with all this? Whatever you think is right. Your father trusted your judgment more than his own. That evening I sat in Dad's study, my study now, and opened the final letter. Marcus, it began, if you're reading this, then you've inherited more than you ever expected and more than you probably wanted. I know this feels overwhelming. It felt overwhelming to me too when I was your age and starting the company. The money isn't the point. The company isn't even the point. The point is what you do with the opportunity. I built Thompson Industries to support families, to create jobs, to build something that would last. But somewhere along the way I lost sight of that. I became focused on accumulating wealth instead of creating value. David and Michael see money as something to be spent. You see it as something to be used. That's why you're the right person to carry this forward. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't deserve this. You earned it through kindness, through loyalty, through being the son I needed when I needed one most. Build something better than I did. Treat people better than I did. And remember that the real wealth isn't in the bank accounts. It's in the lives you touch along the way. I love you, son. Make me proud. I folded the letter and looked around the study. Tomorrow I would start learning how to run a company. I would figure out how to save those 847 jobs. I would become the leader that Dad believed I could be. But tonight I just sat there missing my father and trying to understand how my life had changed so completely in a single afternoon. The bastard son had become the heir. The afterthought had become the future. And somehow, Dad had known all along that this was how it was supposed to be. 3 months later, Thompson Industries announced its most profitable quarter in 5 years, thanks to new leadership and a renewed focus on employee welfare and customer service. David and Michael used their trust funds to start a consulting business. It failed within 6 months. Patricia moved to Florida, where she tells anyone who'll listen about how her stepson stole her son's rightful inheritance. And I kept Dad's picture on the desk and tried every day to build something he would be proud of. Because sometimes the most powerful inheritance isn't money, it's the responsibility to do better than those who came before you.